today is a very, very important topic because it's a very practical topic. Let me get rid of the share here. So we're talking today about caring for an aging loved one, which is something we do here at Tully Law Group every single day of the week. We're going to be addressing the legal and the practical steps that every family should know. Now, and again, for those that know us, we are a very unique firm in that we have a model based on what's called life care planning, which is a very unique model. It's a very holistic model. So it's not just attorneys doing attorney things. We have our elder care coordinators on staff as well. So every family we work with is going to have a seasoned, experienced advocate by their side through the entire long-term care journey. So today we are fortunate to have Deanna Rubino with us. Deanna, just to give you the formal introduction here, Deanna is a licensed, there you go, is a licensed master social worker, and she's a licensed nursing home administrator as well. She has nearly 30 years of experience specializing in gerontology. She began her career as a nursing home social worker and advanced to become an administrator of a Suffolk County facility. 4 years ago, Deanna returned to her first passion, which is helping older adults and their families through guidance, advocacy, and support by joining us here over at Tully Law Group, again, as an elder care coordinator, or what we call an ECC. Deanna is a very active member of several professional management organizations, including the Case Management Society of America, the Life Care Planning Law Firms Associations, as well as the Long Island Licensed Social Workers Association. She has, and I can attest to this, brought to Tully Law Group extensive experience in navigating the full spectrum of elder care needs, from acute care placement to in-home services as well. She's certainly skilled in interdisciplinary collaboration, care planning, and advocacy. She's deeply committed to enhancing the quality of life for older adults through education, empowerment, and compassionate guidance. And again, we're very fortunate to have Deanna with us here at Tully Law Group. And what we're going to be talking today, so we'll put it this way. Welcome, Deanna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everybody.
It's our pleasure, of course, and we're going to, hopefully our viewers will learn what they can learn. And by the way, for those watching, if there's questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be happy to answer them when we finish up in a little bit. I'm still trying to figure things out from our technical difficulty with sizing of things here, so I apologize. Here we go. All right, so what we're going to be talking about today is the legal and the practical steps that every family should know when we're dealing with an aging loved one. And it happens whether we realize it or not. It happens whether we want it to or not. We'll talk about the big picture, the legal and the financial part of planning. We'll talk about the legal aspect specifically. We'll talk about the care coordination aspect. We'll talk about common triggers that families face, challenges that families face, and kind of hear a little bit of a case study that Deanna will share that she was able to help a family specifically with. And that's just one. She's been with us for years, so there are hundreds of families that she's been able to help. And again, if you have a question, please feel free to put it into the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll get to it at the end. Background, we've been doing these webinars for 5 years, a little 5.5 years, since probably April of 2020. We've had different guests from different disciplines. We've talked about substantive issues as far as Medicaid eligibility. We've spoken about estate planning. We've talked about asset protection planning. We've talked about all of those topics in depth in these webinars. If you want more information or catch one of those older webinars, then you can simply go to our website, tullylawgroup.com. Again, TULLY lawgroup.com. And under the navigation bar, you can toggle down to webinars, and you can see our past webinars there, and again, learn more about some of the specific things that we'll be talking about today. So one thing that we face all the time, Deanna, is the reality of a crisis. And we'll talk a little bit about families planning in advance versus families being faced with a crisis. First question, why why do families seem to wait until the crisis before they start to act?
Well, I think that's a very good question because I think oftentimes we are dealing with families that are in crisis. And I think that we have families, no, none of us go through life and we have that wheel and we say, you know what, when I turn 65, my health is going to start to fail, or I'm going to fall and fracture my hip and need, rehab, and then I'm going to need care. So I think that people just they don't want to think of
Yeah,
the aging process
right.
as needing help.
Mm,
They're supposed to be the golden years. They're supposed to be what you've saved all your life for. You
yeah,
save for the travel, for the spending time with the grandkids,
right.
not needing care. So I think that just by that, the evolution of it,
Mm,
people don't normally filter in or calculate in the what ifs. The
yeah.
what if I become sick, or what if I need care?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
oftentimes, a lot of our families that are going through this, they don't want to put that on their kids. So therefore, they don't have those discussions
Right,
with their children on, if ever you're faced with a decision that you have to make for me, this
right.
is what I want or this is what I don't want.
Yeah.
So I think that that's generally why, people fall. Ice
Mhm.
happens, winter happens,
Yeah,
and people don't, split second, something could happen and they could need that emergency care, and then what happens?
sure.
So I
That's,
just don't think that by nature people prepare or thinking
mhm.
that to that extent,
Yeah.
and that's human.
It most certainly is, and I'm glad you finished on that because I just think it is human nature. I'll agree with you,
Mhm.
100%. The reality is that when it comes to planning and acting in regard to these issues, you can do it in advance,
Mhm.
or you can wait till the crisis hits. By planning in advance, which is something that I say quite frequently, what we're able to do is we have more options. And when we're planning in advance, it is less stressful. And when we're planning in advance, we can usually save more money. The opposite is true, however, in a crisis. In a crisis, there's going to be more stress, there's going to be less options, and there's going to be more costs associated with it because everything's urgent and everything's an emergency. Just think of choosing to change your battery on a Saturday by driving to the auto shop versus something happening on the LIE at 60 miles an hour, right? Planning it versus the crisis. And also human nature, when we're talking about planning in advance, we're talking about family, we're talking about children, we're talking about health, we're talking about inheritances, we're talking about family dynamics and relationships. These are not easy issues. So please, Deanna and I are certainly not judging or in fact, we're doing the opposite. We're
Mhm.
understanding how complicated these issues are. My own dad took a fall a couple of months ago, and it was out of left field, and it happens. Gratefully, though, being my parents, they've got the planning set up. Thank God he doesn't need care. But if they do, we're halfway there already. We've got things set up. So that's understandable. Now, the what I'll jump in here, Deanna, is that when we're talking about care coordination, this is a very, very integral part of what we do here as a law firm. And again, the idea of life care planning is integrating the legal and financial aspects of aging together with the care aspects. So when we're sitting with a family who is facing a long-term care need, we will address the care, what we call the care domain, the financial domain, and the legal domain. And we'll go through each of those topics and explain what's been happening, what is happening now, and what can happen in the future. But we're always going to look to see that and make sure we have certain legal foundational planning and protection in place. For example, um, and I'll say this is for people in their 60s, before there's a diagnosis, before there's a crisis, we want to make sure that we have certain planning documents in place. So, for example, a last will and testament, we're all very familiar with that. In fact, we get calls with that question probably 5, 6 times a week. I need a will. And we know families need a lot more planning and protection than that, but at least that's an opening to talk about and a realization that at least we need some type of planning and protection as we're getting older. So we welcome those calls. Everybody needs a last will and testament. As my other webinars and as we educate in our process, we don't want to use the will because that requires a court proceeding called probate, which is a different discussion, but you still need a will. And then again, in looking at the legal tools that we want families to be prepared with, the most important planning document on the legal front is what I call, or what we call, a durable modified power of attorney. Rather straightforward, the power of attorney is going to be a document where you can pick one or two people to help you with legal and financial decisions. Generally, it's effective immediately. However, I called it a durable and a modified power of attorney. Durable means that the document is built to last should mental capacity decline. So when we're talking about estate planning and aging and elder care, it must always be a power of attorney that is durable. In addition, it has to be modified, which means that the document itself is expanded so that it is made more comprehensive to deal specifically with asset protection issues, income protection issues, elder care concerns, retirement accounts, Medicaid benefits, etc. The standard power of attorney that New Yorkers can download or buy at Staples or get on a website does not have all of those necessary modifications. Probably 2 to 3 times a week, we're sitting with a client, right, Deanna, in our meetings, and
Yep.
they don't have the right power of attorney. They think they're good. Just yesterday, just
Yep.
last night in our yesterday in our 3 o'clock consult, the wife was prepared. She brought her documents for us to review. I have a power of attorney, she says. I'm good, but then we got to take a look at it. There's no modifications. It will not help. The husband had suffered a stroke. Gratefully, capacity is there, so we can get a new correct one put into place. So power of attorney is huge when it comes to advanced planning, and very necessary. If it's a crisis, we need to get that power of attorney done as soon as possible. If there's no power of attorney, or if there's no modifications, and if there's no capacity to sign a proper power of attorney, then the family gets thrust into a court proceeding called guardianship, which you don't want your family to do or to endure. So I'm spending an extra couple minutes because this power of attorney is probably the most important legal aspect of preparing for and how to help an aging parent or an aging loved one. Okay. We often utilize trusts as well, revocable trust in some circumstances, but primarily what's called an irrevocable trust. That's often a part of what's called a Medicaid planning strategy, or what we put into place called an elder care protection plan. We'll say every day of the week that every adult should have an estate plan in place, the will, the durable modified power of attorney, healthcare proxy, and the living will. But as we hit certain stages, for example, you turn 65 and you get your Medicare card, you should also have your elder care protection plan in place, which deals with the irrevocable trust and the asset protection. If you want more information on that, again, just go to the website, tullylawgroup.com. We have a lot of videos that talk about that trust in particular. So I think it's important, Deanna, that we at least cover those foundational legal part of it. We'll spend a bit of time talking about, of course, the care side of it too.
Absolutely. Because I think you're right, Brian. I think you need one side to help the other side as well.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think they kind of just naturally flow
yeah,
back and forth, and
yeah. The reality is, and why this model, why this system helps the best in the best way, is mom or dad, your loved one, your spouse, is not just words and numbers on a piece of paper. They're just not a legal document. We're talking about your wife, your husband, your mom, your dad, your sibling, your grandparents. This is somebody you love, respect, and admire, and we want to make sure that they're taken care of. So just going to an attorney to get the legal stuff, what I call the documents and the dollars taken care of, that's leaving a huge component as far as dignity is concerned, as far as well-being is concerned, and quality of life, and that's the care part. It's why back in 2007, 2006, I started looking at how can we start helping people better. And we've been able to build this model, this life care planning model, truly based on what my own parents could have used back in the 80s, helping their grandparents. You know,
I think you're
it's
empowering them to
oh,
make decisions when they can and have
absolutely
them have that control
right.
over their future, over their finances, over their decisions that are going
Sure.
to have to be made.
Yep.
And that's empowering for people to know that they can do that and it's
In
not going to be taken
advance.
away from them.
Agreed. 100%.
Yeah.
Yes, true. All right, so let's get into a little bit more about care coordination. So, um, we want people to plan in advance. We want people to protect in advance, but there may come a time, whether you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, because Deanna, we've seen cases in families of all ages.
All ages.
Um, what are we looking at? What do families misunderstand the most? What do they, you talk to neighbors, you look at the website or Google, and maybe you're not getting the whole picture. So what do they misunderstand the most when it comes to long-term care?
Well, I think that's a good point and a good question because I think that there are many different things that people have misunderstandings about.
Hmm.
For starters, a lot of people, when it comes to bringing in outside care into the home,
Yep.
a lot of people have heard those horror stories,
Mm.
have heard those, they have people that come into the house and they take advantage and they don't want strangers in their house taking care of their parents
Hmm.
and that's a valid and a very 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 appropriate thought. You
Hmm.
just always have to make sure that you're being careful and you're being cautious with whatever agency or whatever staffing agency that you're bringing into your
Sure,
home,
sure.
and making those provisions to safeguard.
Mhm.
Sometimes there needs to be cameras or sometimes there needs to be check-ins, um, you know normal things like not having expensive things around. So I mean there are things that you can do to kind of debunk that misunderstanding
Mhm.
about strangers coming into their house.
Sure.
I think that people oftentimes it's their responsibility to take care of a family member.
Mm.
It's their job.
Right, right.
And caregiving burnout is a very real thing. It sometimes is it's sometimes is harder on a
Mm.
caregiver because we always tell our clients you're not going to be good to anybody if you're not well yourself.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
our goal is always to have people, we want that family member, we want that husband or that wife to be
Right.
a spouse,
That's
that
right.
child to be a child and not be that caregiver.
Sure.
And I think that people, it's hard for them and they have that misunderstanding that it's my responsibility and I need to take on this role as a caregiver.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of times in long-term care, people generally for years have had there's been a negative connotation towards nursing home
Mhm.
placement or assisted living placement or places other than their home.
Mhm.
And although our goal is to keep people in their own environment, sometimes, they need that higher level of care. And I think that families, oftentimes they're afraid of that and they're afraid of the different levels on
Right.
several different reasons. It could
Right.
be financial, how am I going to pay for this?
Mhm.
Um, and when we look at Medicaid, in the Medicaid program, whether it's community and or chronic for nursing home, a lot of people don't realize that Medicaid has these programs in place
Yeah.
to help cover the costs
Mhm.
of caregiving. And I think a lot of people think of Medicaid as, for the indigent or
Oh my God.
more of people who don't have money or live in the streets as
Mm.
opposed
Mm.
to the
Mm.
different programs that they offer.
Yeah.
And I think that the education of this is so important for families because there's help out there. It's just a matter of how you seek it
Yep.
and
Yep.
the advice and the guidance that you get because I think that's so vitally important,
Mhm.
for our clients and people that are looking for care.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, the so the point you made, and I agree wholeheartedly, is there's often a misunderstanding of an aide coming in,
Mhm.
and perhaps, and we'll hear this often, I don't want somebody living in my house, I don't want somebody. But on the other hand, Deanna, how many times have we had families after their loved one ultimately passes and they go, listen, Barbara became part of the family, that
Oh,
aide all the time.
all the time, all
Um,
the time.
so it's being open to the reality that help is needed and there is a professional out there that can help. And through our connections and through our agencies, it usually works out pretty well.
I had a client recently that was in a facility getting rehab.
Hmm.
She was due to come out,
Right.
and the family was very fearful of her being on her own,
Hmm.
especially right after rehab. We were in the process of helping her with the
Yep.
Medicaid process for bringing in services under community Medicaid.
Yep.
And she was resistant. I had a laugh in the care plan meeting because I thought she was gonna like her if her looks could kill, I was done. I mean, she was anything that I made a suggestion, she was ready to pull my hair out.
Yeah.
Um, I just actually saw her last week in her home,
Right.
and she
Good.
loves her caregivers.
Yeah.
I looked at her and I said, "Oh, it's not so bad having care in the house." And she just started to laugh, and she's like, "I'm so glad that I allowed the process,
Hmm. Good.
because she's secure in her house.
Yep.
She's so happy to be home.
Hmm.
She has engaged well with the caregivers,
Yeah.
and she's thriving.
Right.
And she's doing
That's
great.
wonderful.
And the family's the family. They're not that caregiving person.
Hmm.
And she's
Hmm.
doing amazing. And so
Good.
that's what it's about. It's those
Absolutely.
stories. It's those
Making those
stories that,
connections. Sure,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, and other points that you shared, which I just want to reiterate, um, Medicaid is the Medicaid program we're talking about is what's called long-term care Medicaid, and it's not for everybody. Sometimes we're helping families that are privately paying for care, and that's fine. That's because you still need the care coordination and the care advocacy. Medicaid is just one payer source. There's private pay possibilities, there's long-term care insurance possibilities, and again, we help with all of those things. So today is not so much about who the actual payer is, although that's the objections we get and the misunderstandings that we hear, but it's when somebody needs the care, period, regardless of how it's actually going to be paid for. But when we say Medicaid, we're talking about long-term care Medicaid. And long-term care Medicaid is, period, the payer of long-term care for the middle class. It is not the typical welfare program or food stamp program that we often might hear about. And it's out there to pay for families and help your loved ones because $100,000 a year for an aide or $250,000 a year for a nursing home is not something that most families can do. So taking advantage of the rules and the eligibility that we walk people through is making sure that we are utilizing the programs that are available. So it's again understanding what's out there and what's not out there. Um, so what should people be on the lookout for, Deanna? So what are the certain triggers that might happen? And again, I'll be that broken record. We want people to have their planning in place while they're younger and healthier. So again, 60s. We generally want the irrevocable trust in place. We want our durable modified powers of attorney in place. We want all of our planning and protection at least started so that we have the option for Medicaid later. There's that whole concept of a look back period if you wait too long. Again, I can answer that in a question or we can deal with that on another webinar from our website. But what are the triggers that people face? What should people be looking at? And we do our life care consults together, so we get questions like this quite often.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, again, like what I had said before, nobody goes through life anticipating certain
Yeah.
things.
Right.
Sometimes it's a fall or a
Hmm.
hospitalization.
Right.
Sometimes, oftentimes we get families that are newly diagnosed
Hmm.
with, or sometimes not, and they're just picking up on people's memory.
Right.
Maybe mom or dad start repeating certain things, or
Yep.
you tell them, that they have an appointment and then they forget that they have the appointment.
Right.
Um,
Right.
there's some, really severe cases where, a parent or a loved one is driving and they get lost. They just don't know how to get back home. Um, or, caregiver burnout. That's another trigger,
Yeah.
when you yourself are giving that care, or you see a family member giving that care and you see them becoming maybe a little short, maybe they're losing patience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's also to the financial, some people just don't have those funds
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
caregiving.
Yeah.
And I think watching out for those things,
Right.
it's vitally important, because you always want to try to be ahead of
Mm-hmm.
the event.
The curve. Yeah.
But if you can't, it's always important to keep out for those triggers, because I think then, you want to try to avoid a crisis,
Mm-hmm.
having to react in a crisis situation,
Yeah. So
as opposed to,
for me, the get the Medicare card at 65,
yeah,
make sure you have the elder care protection plan in place. Um,
have those
re-
conversations with your families.
Conversations,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're not easy, but
Mhm.
they can take time. There could be multiple conversations. They need to be respectful. They're not about the finances. They're about making sure mom and dad's wishes, or siblings or spouses' wishes, are going to be followed.
Yeah.
Um, but as much as we encourage, and the reason we do these webinars is for people to realize the planning should get done in advance to avoid the crisis. A good 60-70% of our meetings are about the crisis because the people haven't done the planning in advance. So just to share,
And
the crisis can be an Alzheimer's or dementia diagnosis.
right.
The crisis can be a fall and a hospitalization and a rehab stay.
Mhm.
The
A
crisis can be,
UTI that leads them to the hospital.
correct. Yeah, the crisis can be mom left the front door and got lost. There are things that can happen, and then you need to mobilize. You really
Right.
do.
Right.
Um, Deanna mentioned earlier the family being the caregivers or the spouse or the children. Not necessarily the best case scenario at all. The idea of burnout is real.
Mhm.
And when we have an 80-year-old couple and dad needs help and mom's doing all the caregiving, we need to be mindful that mom's health is critical. If God forbid something happens to mom, now what? What's our plan B? Ha- Excuse me, having a plan B is significant and it can save a tremendous amount of stress.
Mhm.
So,
And I think, Brian, you bring a perfect point.
yeah.
Like oftentimes it's you go to see, you go to a family member and you see that the medications haven't been touched.
Oh,
And that's a big one. That's one
sure.
that we see a lot. But Brian, how can families plan so that one spouse, so that they plan so that one spouse isn't impoverished, or what happens, so that they can handle that financial and care challenge?
Interesting. So the crisis that we see often is sitting with a spouse, again, just yesterday, of course.
Mhm.
Um, Gentleman was fine until the stroke. And now they're faced with a crisis. They literally rushed a power of attorney, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the wrong form. So we have to redo all that. But what you're looking at is paying for the care once the medical component is over, which is the doctors, the hospitals, the rehab center. Once that medical component is underway, realizing insurance is covering most of that, then the reality of long-term care comes into play. And are we looking at a long-term care stay in a facility like a nursing home, or are we able to get mom or dad back home and look at a long-term care environment within the home, which is ideal. And as Deanna said, that's what we're always going to try to do. We want to get our clients back home as long as that's possible. When it comes to paying for long-term care, out of pocket, it's what usually happens in the beginning. There's long-term care insurance, which most people don't have. And then ultimately, you're looking at Medicaid, which we've mentioned several times. So Medicaid is out there. It is, as I shared, the payer of long-term care for the middle class. You just have to be careful how you navigate it. You have to be careful who's helping you navigate it with you. We've heard nightmares of nursing homes doing Medicaid applications. We've heard and cleaned up messes of non-attorneys and families themselves doing Medicaid applications because the eligibility and the protection of the spouse are paramount. And when it's not, what I'll say respectfully, if it's not an experienced law firm that does this type of thing every single day of the week, you might be missing something. So yes, there's things called spousal refusals that can be implemented when necessary. The idea of protection with an irrevocable trust, making sure things are done right the first time, so the application is approved as soon as possible, and you're not missing months of eligibility because the application has a mistake or it was done incorrectly, and now you're responsible for the bill. So when we take the finances very seriously, for us, the finances aren't the driver. The care issues are. Make
Right.
sure your loved one gets the best care possible. That's why we practice and do what we do. But the finances and the legal protections are super critical. And the attorneys, we will, as the attorneys, we will do all we can, from the irrevocable trust work to transfers and gifting and spousal refusals, to ensure, again, all of that's as protected as possible. So I'd say the best answer to prevent impoverishment for mom or dad is to make sure you've got the right attorney walking you through it. Because then they'll have the whole arsenal of tools that can be utilized. Um, you don't want an attorney that says they do elder law, but they also do personal injury and real estate and corporate law, because all my team does is elder law and planning, and there's 30 of us, and there's truly not enough time in the day to handle everything, because there's just so much flying at us and so many circumstances and so many changes. So a firm that focuses, concentrates in elder law, or what we call elder care and planning, is going to be the way to go for sure. And then you'll get the right guidance and the right support as things move forward. So it's, again, it goes hand in hand with the care. Mom or dad,
Absolutely.
again, it's not just the will, it's not just the trust, it's everything, which is how we approach it for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's a holistic way of providing
yeah,
a full service
yeah.
of
Mom is
legal
not
and
just,
care.
yeah, right. Mom is not just the money.
Right.
Mom is not just the house. Mom is not just the care. Mom is everything.
Hmm.
And if you're not
Just
addressing
mom.
it that way, it's mom. And so if you're not addressing it in that holistic way, then with your advisors, then guess what? Whatever they're not covering is still on your shoulders.
Mhm.
Um, and that's why life care planning works, is because we lift as much as we can off of the family shoulders. Um, you were sharing a little bit earlier before we started about a great case study, a great story. So if you can share that
Yeah.
again, please.
So, when we look at the cases that we have and the clients that we help and we advocate for,
Right,
there's so many scenarios and so many case studies.
right.
But one that I was talking to Brian about earlier, that really kind of encompasses, the need for what we do is, I recently had a client. He was 67,
Hmm.
and he had a stroke. It was a very
Yeah,
severe stroke. Was still working.
yeah.
Again, was going through life like,
Right.
like we all go through life.
Hmm.
We live paycheck to paycheck. We pay our bills. We, enjoy our family time.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he was hospitalized and
Right,
then went for rehab.
right.
And when we were engaged with the family, it was really crucial because it was what happens. He's in a rehab place. The money, they didn't have the money to pay for the rehab privately to continue with care,
Hmm.
but their house, nor was the family equipped to take care of somebody at that level at home,
Right.
without the supportive care. And again, family being overwhelmed, wife still working,
Hmm.
because bills still have to get paid,
Right,
life still happens.
right.
Um, we were able to kind of come in, we were able to walk them through the
Hmm.
process, walk them through, holding their hand, being there for every step of the way,
Hmm.
kind of,
Hmm.
being in front at 3 steps so that we can explain it and make sure that it smoothly transfers. Know the programs that are out there that we could tap into to
Hmm.
make it as safe as we could. The end result was we got him home. We got
Yeah,
him home.
yeah.
We got an amazing award of hours for him because he
Hmm.
truly did need it. Wife is able to go back to work.
Right.
Wife is able to be a wife.
Hmm. Right.
Kids come over not because they have to, but because
Ah,
they want to, and they want
beautiful.
to spend
Mhm.
time, and they are spending time.
Yeah,
And it's just one of the things that kind of
yeah.
solidifies what we do.
Mm-hmm.
and looking at that full picture and making sure that we're
Right.
taking those pressures off of the families. But
Right.
and it was now it seems easier than it was at the time, but it was being there to help advocate the family every step of the way,
Mm-hmm.
advocating for supplies, advocating for staffing,
Mm-hmm.
advocating for hours,
Right.
and doing a lot of reassurance and providing that support for the family to make sure that
Yeah.
he was safe and they were financially secure. And I think that
Huge.
was a perfect example of the full care and the full picture of care that we
Right.
provide for our clients.
And that's just one case, one
Right.
family.
Correct. Correct.
I've been doing this since 1998, only dealing with the advocacy on staff since 2009. So 27 years as an elder law attorney, but 16 of those years has been with an advocate holding hands through the process. And I can guarantee you the business, the help, the services, the reward, the peace, and being able to sleep at night knowing we're providing the services that are very much so needed. It's
Hmm.
you can't even explain it. You can't even explain it. And not only that, there's families that we've been with for 10, 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
The we are not a transactional type of firm. So when we're talking about mom is not just a transaction either. So the ability to have the advocacy and have the support and having our whole firm on call year by year is valuable and gives you that peace of mind. So starting to wrap up a little bit. I know we started a little late, but we're doing pretty good on time. Some practical tips. I want to share that a little bit. So starting practical tip number one, start the conversations earlier. We've said it a little bit today
So
already.
important.
Yeah, yeah. And what we were talking about earlier was you don't wait for the fall.
Hmm.
Don't wait for the fall. I know we're approaching the fall, different type of fall. You want to make sure that if you want to continue the analogy, deal with this in the spring, right before the fall. Um, you want to make sure you have the proper legal documents in place that we spoke about. So critical is that durable modified power of attorney, that asset protection trust, wills, as well as the healthcare documents. On the care side, you want to make sure you got a list of doctors, you have a list of medications.
Records.
There could be a binder, there could be go to Staples or Amazon and buy one of those plastic, those folders. Just keep everything in there.
You ask my mom, she'll say that I was incredibly annoying, but I always had that to-go bag waiting for any event because again, that's the last time, you don't want to scramble to try to get information or to run around trying to get information. It's just so much easier if it's kept in one spot.
Absolutely. The insurance cards, for example,
Yeah.
they'll get those
Yeah.
in there. And if you have siblings and another parent, have conversations. Who's responsible for what? What are the responsibilities? What's expected?
Mhm.
And in this day and age, it's very different than several generations ago where most people stayed in one home, right? You'd hang out on the stoop and you had families, all in the same block. We're not there anymore. I had a Zoom yesterday morning. We got a son in Virginia and a son in Boston. We're talking about mom and dad here in Nassau County. It's a different world, and what can they do and what can't they do to support things. So these conversations should happen again before the fall.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that all being said, is there anything else you'd like to share, Deanna? I'm going to open up to questions after this.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. It's just
Yeah,
again, so important just to have that
right.
conversation.
It's huge.
Yeah.
All right. So, folks, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for
Thank
Deanna
you.
for being our guest today. I know
Thank
I
you.
see you every day of the week anyway, but it's great to see you on Zoom.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any questions from our attendees? Again, in that chat box, that Q&A box, happy to answer. We do provide free consultations, so you can go to the website, tullylawgroup.com. You can call the office, 631-424-2800. Again, 424-2800. Free consultations with myself and my team. We do have offices throughout. So we got Melville as the primary. We've got Riverhead. We've got Northport Village, and we've got Garden City. But again, Melville is the primary, but we can meet folks in different parts of the island if necessary. And it's been a pleasure. All right.
Yes.
So we don't have any questions popping up. So we'll say thank you, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you so much for having me. I love it.
Okay. Always a pleasure. Thank you, Deanna. Good.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.